All right, welcome to the American Legion Show. I hope you like that title. So,
yes, I do. Hey, Kevin, I can't hear you.
My mic was muted. I'm good. I don't know what does that. So
I'm sorry.
Okay. Oh no, you're good. You're good. So welcome to the program. We will have fun tonight. Very unique. Yes. Here's some feedback a little bit there. Let's see. Is that on your end or mine?
I don't hear anything on my end.
Okay, good, good. So yes, let's do it. Okay, so this is right here. Here we go. Right, here we go. I got it now. So now we are live for real. Can you hear that? Right,
yes, I can.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So welcome to the American Legion Show. Your host, Kevin White. Can you hear feedback?
No. Okay. No feedback.
Great. Okay. So tonight our host is our guest is Mr. Curt Radabaugh. He is George Washington in the flesh, portrays George Washington. And tell us a little bit about yourself, sir.
Well, again, my name is Curt Radabaugh. I'm 60 years of age. I'm a former Marine, retired law enforcement, spent 32 years in uniform, including the Marine Corps and Columbus Police, law enforcement, Kentucky, South Carolina, and back here in Ohio. And I finally hung up my badge in 2014. Lover of history. It's been my favorite subject since I was a kid. I've loved our American history, regardless if it was on the East Coast with the Revolutionary War period, the colonial period, going out to the West Coast, the Indian Wars, anything in between. I love the American history, but in particular, our founding, what brought us about, what's kept us here, who brought us here, and all the above. I love sharing history. And a few years ago, I started thinking, how could I come about doing this? So I decided I would don the uniform and share that history. I don't know how far you want me to go with that, but there's a little bit.
No, that's awesome. So your inspiration is history. You love history. You admire what happened. And I think you picked a very awesome character. How did you pick him instead of, say, somebody else?
Well, I picked him because, one, he is my favorite character in any era of history. George Washington was. Not only for what he brought himself up to be, but what he had to persevere through, what his standards were for himself, for others, and what he was able to do with the limited access that he had. We know from time and probably innumerable books on the subject matter of the Revolutionary War and George Washington, his perseverance, his survival, his dedication, his duty and service. So with that's been my particular character, my favorite character in our world history. But also why I picked him is I don't look like Thomas Jefferson. I look like Adams. I don't look like Benjamin Franklin, or don't look like Benjamin Franklin. But, I started thinking about, could I pull off a George Washington? So I put on a hat and pulled the hair back, and I said, all right, I can do this. So I've been doing it now for about a year and a half. Decided probably 2 or 3 years ago, but it took some time to put this together, because I tell you what, sir, putting this uniform together and finding a seamstress that would do a professional job on it, and the dollar signs it took, it's rather expensive adventure, but I've got it, and I've been doing it, like I said, a year and a half, and love every minute of it.
So George Washington was the commander for the Revolutionary War against England. As a matter of fact, you see back here behind me, you see the Minuteman?
I sure do.
That's every National Guard member, that's their trophy they get when they retire. So, and that means a lot. Dropping your plow and going to war, that's exactly what the Guard does. And I admire all those people who actually fought against the big guy, the British. That right there is amazing, amazing stuff. So, can you talk about that?
Sure. Let's talk about the Minutemen you were talking about right there. America did not have any type of standing army. The only thing that we had in years past were militias. Washington, as a young major or lieutenant colonel, was in charge of, adjutant general of the 1/4 of the troops that were in Virginia, because there was 4 adjutants, and Washington was one of those in Virginia, and they defended the frontier. The frontier in those days was Western Virginia, Western Pennsylvania, up to the Allegheny Mountains. And you move on forward, you get to the Revolutionary War period, you got the British headed out to Lexington and Concord in 1775. That April 19th shot heard around the world. And who responded? Neighbors, farmers, shopkeepers. There was no experienced military. These guys were coming together to defend the homeland against a superior, world-renowned force, strongest in the world, that they claim. So they came from everywhere. Militiamen, just like that statue is right there. And when the British got there, I don't think they were expecting what they got. They certainly weren't expecting the trip back to Boston and the harassment and the fire and the way the militiamen kept up against them. So when Washington gets made commander, when he's at the Second Continental Congress in June, he arrives and takes over the force up in Cambridge on July 3rd. He takes over 12,000, and this is not a trained military. Think about this. When Washington was commissioned, on that day, the army consisted of one man, George Washington, until he got to Cambridge and took over the troops. And then, was he the happiest in the world about seeing the disciplinary issues and everything with the army? No, but he took over. He persevered. He was strong on discipline. He immediately set in place standards, discipline rules, orders of the day. And it came about, and as we progressed, and we know how the winter, jumping fast forward here, but just for a moment, we know how the winter in 1778 with Valley Forge went. Here came Baron von Steuben, and what did he do? So it slowly came around. The army that marched out of Valley Forge was not the army he took over in July of 1775.
Yeah, lots of perseverance. Well, you really don't know what you have, right? He didn't know what he had, but he had enough people to do the right thing, for our country and to avoid the taxes. I know he's staunchly against the taxes coming from England and all that stuff. So, and I guess he was de facto general of the army. So he was the supreme leader for the U.S. And surprisingly, I found out he was homeschooled.
Yes, he was. As far as his education goes, in 1743, his father dies. He's 11 years of age. He doesn't get to go to England and attend Appleby School outside of London like his 2 older brothers, Lawrence and Augustine did. So, that's pretty much it. So he gets homeschooled and maybe a tutor here and there at a local school, and that's it. The rest of George Washington's education was self-taught. George Washington he described his education with one word: defective. We're talking about his learning. But how did he fix that? He sought out books. Now, he wasn't a reader of just anything and everything. What George Washington read about were things he needed to read about and know. He would order books on the military. He ordered books on farming, animal husbandry, crop rotation, the latest journals from England. Matter of fact, he had correspondence back and forth with England as far as planning. But whatever he needed to learn about, that's what he purchased as far as books goes. So, and in his library, he had well over 900 books and volumes and different papers, different manuals, different, different magazines and newspapers of the era.
That's incredible. Our generals go to West Point or wherever now. They learn everything, but this guy was smart enough, had the ability to keep it together, which I think is amazing, against the British. This is like the A team coming to the B team and
You
defeating.
know, I don't even know if I would say a B team at this point. You think about, you just mentioned our officers go to West Point, OCS, or whichever case may be, or
Yeah.
Officer Candidate School or West Point, 4 years. Now you got George Washington. When he starts off in his military career, he's around 20, 21 years of age. He's 21 years of age when Lieutenant Governor Dinwiddie he sends him up to Watertown, Pennsylvania, which is then Fort LaBeouf, as an emissary with a letter to tell the French commander, get out of the area. This is British territory. We don't want you here. I mean, he's 21. You know, the journey made with Christopher Gist and other individuals up there and back. I mean, he nearly dies twice, gets shot at, almost drowns, makes it back. That's in 1754. 1754, he leads another expedition out west in 1754, and that's the Battle of Fort Necessity, you know, and he loses that. Terrible loss, July 3rd, 1754. Next year, July 9th, 1755, with Braddock's campaign as an aide. He goes with Braddock, and it's a horrible loss. They got 1,300 men. 700 men are either killed or wounded. Braddock dies 3 or 4 days later from wounds sustained. Washington gets shot. You know, there's four bullet holes through his coat, gets and hat. 2 horses get shot out from underneath him. This man learned everything on the job. On the job. There was no sit down with the best instructors, West Point, no OCS. Here it is, George. Do what you can. So there's so much to admire about the man.
21. That's, you know, our generals are like in their late 50s, late 60s. This is, how do you have a mindset? How do you even grasp that at that age? That's incredible.
You know, George Washington at a young age knew what he wanted to do before he even before he became a surveyor. You know, his early career was a surveyor, you know, 16, 17 years of age. Right. At 15 years of age, his brother Lawrence, before he passed away, wants to set him up with possibly going into the Navy. And he's looking at a military career. I mean, he's thought about military career for a while. He looks to go to Navy, but his mother, Mary Ball Washington, very hard-headed woman, very straightforward woman, puts the kibosh on that, says no, and George says okay. So there goes that career. And she was hard on him his entire life. But his military aspirations were set at a young age. And he set himself up, you know, there's that book that he read and he transcribed as a kid, 110 Rules of Ill, and, you know, nice and company and conversation. He set for guidelines for himself. He wrote them out, set them for guidelines, how to carry himself, how to walk into a room, how to hold yourself in company, women and men, you know, just general guidelines. And he set an example of what he wanted to be in his mindset, and he learned to become that person. So that was him all the way through his life. He knew he had a role, and he thought very strongly and hard on how he was going to maintain that role and how his character and how he was going to be perceived. And he stuck to that. You know, they say he was sometimes very unapproachable, stoic, and, you know, straightforward, and what you got was what you got, and you had to be ready to receive what he was ready to offer. But he was a dedicated leader, a strong leader. You know, even, for example, something like time, beyond time. He gave you a 3-minute window. Give you 3 minutes early or 3 minutes late. If you're late, don't bother. So he was very much as far as rules and timeliness and expected discipline.
So what would happen if he actually was able to join the British Army? Because he was turned down for it.
I don't think you and I are talking the way we do right now today.
Mm-hmm.
Because think about this. You know, another reason why I chose George Washington. Could I see John Adams jumping on a horse and leading the Revolutionary War as commander? No. Could I see Thomas Jefferson? No. Benjamin Franklin? No. Nobody with the perseverance or the willingness to serve, the duty to serve, had what Washington had. He had a surreal mindset of duty, and he had a mindset for what he thought America was going to become. and what America could be. And if he had gone in and got that British commission, no, I'm not portraying George Washington today. George Washington may have been just a footnote in history, because he definitely wouldn't have gone on and won the war as a British, whichever, whether it be colonel, general, eventually, whichever, or led the Constitutional Convention, or gone on to become our first president. So who knows what this continent would look like.
Yeah, that's I'm learning so much about him now that I never knew. You talking and all that. That's incredible. That's our history. That's our very first general, our first president. I'm very proud of him.
I am too. I just look at him, and George Washington even told people, because he got the point, people are dang near idolizing later on, but George Washington would remind people, I am just a man. He was just a man. He had faults, he had his weaknesses, he had his strengths, but he was just a man. But what a man, what a leader he was. When someone gets unanimously elected to be commander of the army, unanimously elected by the Constitutional Convention to be president of the convention, and unanimously elected twice to be the president of the United States, there was respect for that man. And the people in the room realized it. When he walked into the room, people took notice, regardless of what room was. A military council of war meeting, Independence Hall, or in New York when he was sworn in as president. People took notice.
Right. So the other thing was I learned that he was a spy, a culper.
He was a spy master. Yeah, he set up the spy ring, especially around New York. But there was intelligence all the way through. But he wanted to know what the movements were for the British all the way through, and there was intelligence and counterintelligence. Sometimes they would send out false information to throw the British off. But yes, he was very good. And some of those people still to this day, we don't know the names of them, who they were. I mean, it'd be great if some document was found, so whatever family lineage down to this time could take pride in that, because that was definitely service to the revolutionary cause, or the cause as we called it during the revolutionary time. This the glorious cause, and that was American freedom.
Okay, George Washington, very diverse guy. He was into mules. Actually got mules from some foreign royal person, a king or something.
Mm-hmm.
So he popularized the mules in the United States. You hear that, the mules.
No, you rarely hear that because, do more work than a horse, less expensive to feed, and you get a donkey and a horse, put that together, and you get your mule. Very strong, right. Very stout, very strong, very stout animal. And he produced a line that's still in America today.
Wow. Okay, so he owned slaves, which a lot of people did. I don't have a problem with that. That's the way our culture was. That's how things were done at that way back then. Mm-hmm. He lost his number one. I can't remember her name. What is her name? Ona escaped. Right. And then she got away from him, and he released the slaves on his deathbed. So I mean that was customary.
No, that was very unheard of. Actually, he's the only founding father to have done that.
Okay.
During all the most founding fathers we know of, he was the only one to do it on his deathbed. When his father died at 11 years of age, he inherited, it was 10 or 11 slaves, but he didn't take possession of them because he hadn't reached the age of dependency, 20, 21, whatever the age where they considered it then. But his mother kept them, never surrendered. As a matter of fact, he inherited a farm, which his mother kept too and never surrendered. By the time he married Martha, he had over 100, I think it was 80 or close to 100 slaves. And that was in January 6, 1759. When he died in 1799, they had around 317 slaves. Now, when Martha came into the marriage, she brought a large number of slaves as well from her husband. He had 15,000 acre estate plantation land, and he had a large number of slaves as well. So when they came in, You know, George Washington slaves, Martha slaves. You know, there was marriages in between the two. There was offspring. There was kids. So the number obviously was going to expand.
Mm-hmm.
But when George died in his will, upon Martha's death, his slaves were to be freed. Some were to be given pensions, or some were to be given financial assistance, and that lasted all the way up until 1832, I believe, when the last money was paid out of the George Washington Mount Vernon estate. Billy Lee, who was his servant all the way through, I mean, early on through the Revolutionary War, through the convention and all that, he gave a pension to and said Billy Lee could either stay here or go somewhere else. It was totally up to him. Billy Lee had been injured. He could barely walk at the end, but Billy Lee, though slave, though a servant, they had a very close relationship to Washington. Billy Lee would pull the general back in engagements and encounters and protect the general many times out on the field, and he was always present. And probably Billy Lee was one of the most famous, most popular, most sought out individuals of a slave during that time, because he was that close to Washington. But the reason Washington left the slaves to be cleared and to be freed upon Martha's death was so Martha could be taken care of, because she's in her late 60s as well. She's about 7 months older than George, so she got taken care of. But Martha freed them early. She freed them before her death in 1802.
Oh, okay.
So they were freed before. Unfortunately, here's what a lot of people don't know: he couldn't free all of the slaves. He could not free the dowry slaves that were brought into the marriage from Martha. When Martha passed away, the slaves that she still possessed, which were well over 100, were passed on to the grandchildren. Her children had died in 1773. Patsy died of seizure in 1781. Jackie died of camp fever at Yorktown with Washington. So there were 2 grandchildren, and the proceeds of the estates went to the grandchildren after that. So unfortunately, he couldn't free them all. But Washington knew early on first of all, like I said, he was born into it, and there's no excuse in it. We all look back on it and say, that's not right. No, but that was the world in 1732 when he was born. That was the world in 1799 when he died.
Right.
So he knew, though, when he toured the southern states, when he toured New England, when he first took over Revolutionary Command, there were black soldiers, militia members in the units up there. And he didn't know how to feel about that, and he didn't want it to continue. But months later, changed his mind and was okay with it. So during this time frame, Washington is having a change. He's seeing the world as it's truly transpiring around him, and he sees, and he's looking at this. No, this is not right. They need to be free. It was his unavoidable subject of regret. There was a book titled that, released recently. But it was the one thing he never wanted to continue, never wanted to sell a slave, never wanted to break up a family, never wanted to purchase another. So a change of heart. And like I said, a lot of people look on the founding fathers and, they were slave owners. Yeah, they were. Unfortunately, that's life. We can't change it. But thank God, Thomas Jefferson, when he wrote the Declaration of Independence, those 2 first paragraphs, he indicted himself and indicted the other founding fathers when he wrote that. And we know those words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. He indicted himself. He indicted us other founding fathers. Are we going to pursue what those words really mean? Is that really all men? Black, white, red?
Right.
So that Declaration of Independence set the ball rolling for something that had never happened before. In Congress, when we get to Constitutional Convention, it was kicked down the road 1808. Couldn't talk about Constitution anymore. But George Washington, during the Constitutional Convention, knew if we were going to have any type of unity whatsoever, that was a subject that would definitely tear it apart, and the South would go home, and we would not have the Union. So was it kicked down the road? Yeah. Was it by necessity, according to the thoughts and what they needed at the time? Yes, but definitely something that took too long. Ask Abraham Lincoln to finally correct. Abraham Lincoln, the Emancipation Proclamation and 13th Amendment, and etc. But they started the ball rolling, but unfortunately didn't act quick enough.
Yeah, some things take time, and even the Africans had slaves, had black slaves. So
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Whites had slaves. Blacks on the continent, blacks in America had slaves. Indentured service. You have 7 years of servitude, and they weren't treated well either. And they were sold from person to person during their servitude. So it's a stain, but history is history. We can't undo it. We learn from it, so we don't repeat it. And look what's going on around us today, around the country. You would think you would never hear some of the things being said today and repeating the same history that we had and we saw in World War II, the things that are being said. But anyways, that's out of my domain. Long time after.
So tell us more about Martha Custis.
Martha Custis. Okay, I met Martha in 1758. I was home from taking a break from my being a colonel. Was home, met her, and it was a whirlwind romance. 3 dates. So on the third one, we get engaged and we get married on January 6, 1759. Martha, very obviously, everybody's well aware of in Virginia history, one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest widow in Virginia. Like I said previously, she had a 15,000-acre estate. John Parke Custis was a wealthy man. And he didn't have a will, so guess what? This was left to Martha and the children. And Martha brought all that into the marriage. So right there, and to begin with, when she married George moved up in the echelon as far as wealthy planners. Martha, very beautiful. Very beautiful woman. Now, she's not always dressed as you see in the pictures with a bonnet and all gray hair and looking kind of plumpy at the end. She was a very attractive young woman, and it was a good fit for Washington. Washington, when he went to Barbados, so I haven't talked about that. When he went to Barbados with his brother Lawrence when he was a young man, because Lawrence had tuberculosis, they were trying to find a climate that could heal him and everything, but his tuberculosis was too far advanced, and it didn't work out. So George came home, but while he was there, he came up with smallpox. And smallpox is known to, make a man sterile. So George Washington never had any children with Martha. Martha came in with the two of the surviving children. She had 4, but 2 survived. And George Washington adopted those kids. So it was a good fit. George didn't have any kids. Martha came in. She had her kids. George was there. I mean, what woman at that time would not want to look up at the dashing colonel, the hero that in the militia, Braddock's campaign and all that. And there he is, and he's courting you. And next thing you know, he's asking you to marry him. So Martha, good fit.
Well, they didn't really live a lot. They would live long, really long. So some people did, a lot of people didn't.
No, I mean, George Washington didn't think he'd live as long as he did. His father died in his late 40s. Brothers died early. So he was not expecting to reach 67. Mm-hmm. But, even for him, he thought that was long. But some, like you said, some founding fathers did. Look at Adams and Jefferson. Adams and Jefferson, not a lot of people know this, died 50 years to the day of the anniversary of July 4th, Independence Day. July 4th, 1826. Now, what are the chances? I mean, that makes you want to hear Twilight music,
Right, yes.
Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, 2 of the big, founding fathers, presidents, writer of Declaration of Independence, John Adams, second president, that were there during the Constitution, not both of them, but were there during the Second Continental Congress, and big power players to last that long. Adams was around 90, 91 years of age, I believe.
That's unusual. That's
right.
interesting.
I mean, look how long they served. I mean, they served for years and years. Service to country. I mean, just the duty, the honor that these men, those founding fathers, and what they gave up. What were those famous words that Jefferson put it toward the, end of the Declaration of Independence? We pledge our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor. I mean, what they put, they're laying it all on the line for what this country was going to be and what, liberty meant. So incredible.
So who were the counterparts to George Washington in England?
Counterparts to George Washington? Are you talking about generals?
Well, that, through his lifetime, I'm sure he had dealings with them.
Oh, well, he had, a lot of people. Well, there's Lafayette's France, but a lot of people he wrote. He wrote Arthur Young. He was a planner and everything. They wrote a lot of letters back and forth as far as crop rotation, fields and, the soil and all this stuff. He wrote a lot back and forth because George Washington was an innovator. He saw that growing tobacco was not going to be productive for him. He was actually losing money. So he brought in corn, wheat, rye, and, even grew hemp on the plantation as a crop. When 1 year he'd grow this, the next year he'd grow something else. Then he would cycle them out because, again, tobacco was doing nothing but depleting the soil. So he was an innovator, and he was a scientific man, just much like, maybe not as much as Jefferson. He was thinking more innovative ways to make Mount Vernon productive. And, Mount Vernon, during much of George Washington's absence, whether it was during the Revolutionary War or the presidency, suffered a lot. He wasn't there to manage it, and he had to manage it, and he had to leave actually the management to cousins and, overseers and whatnot. But his wealth suffered while he was gone.
Yeah, I can't imagine that.
No.
Well, I'm sure that he was very wealthy, but
well,
for that time.
A lot of people think so. Do you realize he had to borrow 600 pounds just to make the presidential journey to New York to be sworn in?
No.
He would borrow 500 pounds, but that would just be enough to cover debts he needed to take care of. So he made it 600 pounds to make sure he could make the journey. So he had to borrow money just to make to New York City and the presidency.
So, okay, let me get this straight. Presidency was in New York. Is that where that was? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, when he gets sworn in at Federal Hall, New York City, that's where the original government was set up at. Later on, it would be moved to Philadelphia. And then after that, Washington, D.C., because President Washington, is the only president not to reside in the White House at that time. Adams was the first one to live in the White House. Now, George Washington designed the capital city, laid it out. Well, we laid it out with L'Enfant and, the other, engineers and so on and so forth that he hired on. And the land had to be bought and the deals had to be made. But, he laid out the way he wanted it to be laid out, but never did obviously get to live in the capital city. Adams was the first to occupy the White House.
Okay. Yeah, I was just there like a couple months ago. DC. That's interesting. I never heard that before. I was never taught that New York was. It's interesting.
New York City. They talk about the swearing in. There's a couple of things that that happened. They even had to scramble to get the Bible. That he was to take the oath on. Of course, that we know that came from a nearby Masonic lodge. The Bible did.
Mm-hmm.
When he takes the oath, he finishes it up. So help me God, and kisses the Bible, and then proceeds inside to the Congress to give his first inaugural address.
So was George Washington a Mason?
Yes, he was.
Okay. All right.
Yes, he was. And that was an early age too. I mean, he started at, if I'm not mistaken, it was either 19 or 20 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, most of his life. And then, of course, after the Revolutionary War, there's the Society of the Cincinnati, and I mean, so many awards and acknowledgments and so on and so forth. Which, some things you can acknowledge, some things you had to back away from. Even that Order of Cincinnati. He was the American Cincinnatus, and that where that comes from, right? Right. People had issues with the Masons. Some people had issues with the Order of the Cincinnati because that was going to be like a hereditary thing, So there's always going to be something that causes a wrinkle in someone's fabric.
So is that where Cincinnati came from, or is that an Indian name?
What's that?
Is that an Indian name, Cincinnati, Cincinnatus?
No, Cincinnatus was a Roman general.
Oh,
now what he did, he laid down the plow. He was a farmer. He laid down the plow after Rome had suffered defeats, and I'm not going to put the whole story in there, but he laid down the plow to go serve. And once he won the victory for the Roman Empire, he hung up the sword, threw down his shield, for lack of a better word, and went back home to the plow. And that's why you look at Washington. When Washington surrenders his commission after the Revolutionary War, 1783. He returns to Congress, hands him his commission, goes home to Mount Vernon, back to be a farmer and a planter. When we all know, with his troops, he could have made himself ruler, because there's the famous Newburgh conspiracy where the troops wanted to go against Congress for the lack of, pay and the retirement and the pension, and they had enough, and Washington got word of it and kind of quashed it. There have been offers for him to be a ruler. Hey, he could easily march on Congress and said, "Look, you have mistreated us. You have not paid us. You have not taken care of us. There are some people that went through all the Revolutionary War didn't get paid right, and were never paid." So he passed up on all of these things. No, and he told those men in that Newburgh address, all the honor that you have won, all that has been accomplished throughout this glorious cause, all the accolades, you are willing to throw them down and take this course of action and charge on Congress. And of course, the famous thing he did, he took out his glasses and read his statement to the men, and tells them in so many words, gentlemen, indulge me. Not only have I grown old and gray in my service to my country, I find myself going blind. There goes the wind out of the balloons and the wind out of their sails, and it's dropped right there. Because you imagine, they think of what they've suffered. What has General Washington suffered? I mean, General Washington was home one time, 7 years, Mount Vernon. So, duty and service.
So thankfully, we didn't go back to that form of government where you had a king. So that's the amazing thing, because most men could not handle it. They would be willing to take over the entire thing by themselves.
Well, it never been heard of. You look at Napoleon, look at all the former ones, Cromwell, and all these people. Once you had power, the hardest thing was to give it up.
Right.
And Washington so willingly, so easily says, "No, I don't want this," and surrenders it back to Congress and goes home. But no, to go back to a monarch and be subservient like they were then, no. And again, without Washington, I don't think we're talking like this today.
Yeah, that also, like you mentioned, Congress and things like that, and so very different than the Congress we have today.
Yeah, very different.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, let's look at Congress. When you had your delegates, you were appointed to go to Congress, right? And now I'm talking pre-Constitution. You had your delegates that were chosen by the people, and you had 6 or 7 for Virginia, and each state gave a certain number. You had your delegates. First Continental Congress, Second Continental Congress. There were 7 for 7, including 7 in Virginia, including Washington. Now, these men, I think there was a whole different mindset, and I don't want to sound negative now, but those men I mean, they all read the classics. They all read about governments. They all read about, countries, how they came about, the different forms of government. Madison read about everyone, Locke, Montesquieu, all these different types of government, all these different writers. When you're talking about a republic before that, people had thought about it in maybe a thought. Okay, what can you imagine if it had nothing like this had ever been done before? Those men went to serve. And then they went home. Congress would go out of session. Okay. Matter of fact, when Washington in 1791, when he went on his tours of the South, then he did Rhode Island after Rhode Island finally accepted the Constitution, and he did his New England tour. He waited until Congress went on a break. They went home. Now, those went home to their professions, went home to their plantation, went home to their farms to work. I don't know how Congress is today. Well, I do know how Congress is today. I try to have faith in it, but I think you, with your grin there, you can see where I'm going with that. It is. Yeah. It's just it's just a whole different feel. I wish the men and women that went to serve in Congress today would put country first, people first, and not forget those. Not to sound like a repeat of so many conversations that's gone on before. Those first three words of the Constitution, do they not know who they serve? It's pretty simple. They're large print right there on top. We the people. Which sounds like when they go to serve, I, the congressman, I, the senator, I, representative, then it's we the people. So, and now you have a Congress now, it's so divided. Neither side wants to give the other side a win.
Right. Yeah. United States.
Yeah. And it seems like nothing is united. You got red, you got blue. And it's like pitchforks and pikes are getting thrown against each other. And what's the best thing for the country? Why can't we do the best thing for the country?
I think that's gone now because, they're giving money to everybody but our citizens and letting people in that are not citizens. And not, yeah. I have a problem with that. I don't care about Ukraine or Israel. Israel can take care of themselves. We need to take care of us.
Right. And George Washington was America first. If anybody listening or hears that doesn't understand that, well, I can point out a lot of readings where George Washington was America first. Even when it came to immigration, he said it should not be encouraged. But even when, is it good for America? What's that person bringing to the table? With Congress today, money is thrown at everything you can possibly think of. Veterans are thrown out of hotels, or veterans are thrown out of places where they sleep for illegal aliens. Illegal aliens are given money, a bus ticket, a plane ticket. Why? Shut the border, and we don't have to worry about spending all that money. And it's billions upon billions upon billions of dollars. So I don't know where it's going to go. I hope November 2024 brings good news.
Yes, that's right.
We'll see.
I agree with you because we got to go back to America first and take care of our own people, take care of our veterans and everything. We need to secure our streets and our neighborhoods and our cities. And it's getting scary. Some places to visit. I don't know about New York anymore, or it's everywhere. It's starting to go everywhere. Still safe in Ohio though.
Somewhat safe here. We're good to go here. I'm glad I migrated west. But the thing about it, when you got no bail laws, and you got people that are getting incarcerated. Some of the protesters that we saw got removed from the college campuses. They may have been arrested, but with less than 2 hours, they're back out on the streets, just like the criminals in New York City. You had the people smiling because they were getting arrested, and you had one particular, district attorney, New York, saying, yes, well, we'll look at some of the cases. We might charge some of them. No, lawlessness is getting awarded. Never should lawlessness get awarded. If you want to protest peacefully, you can protest. You don't get to take over a college campus. You don't get to take over a college library. You don't get to harass a particular segment of society. And I don't care what segment it is. You don't have the right to threaten anybody else peacefully going about their own business on a campus. nationality, whatever, what religious preference, whichever. So when you got one particular element of the college campus being told they're not wanted, to the river to the sea and all these other quotations and everything else, no, we've gone too far. Action needs to be taken and put a stop to it, period. Right now, we're soft on crime all the way across from the East Coast to the West Coast.
But so you see in Chicago, New York, people are turning their attention to not the candidate that we have now, or not the president we have now, because it's getting real for them. People are dying, and people are occupying other people's homes on the border. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing, people are fed up with it. Chicago, the black neighborhoods are revolting against the mayor, the president, everybody, because they don't want this. So it's very, very dangerous situation.
It is. Well, when you have a president that's not in tune with what's going on or denies it, when it says the economy is blazing along strong, when the evidence comes out, when the GDP only increased by 1.4% or 1.2%, and inflation's up there out of control, double digits. People can't buy homes because you got an interest rate of 7, 8, 9%, whatever it is currently, and you can't afford food. Look at the inflation of food prices. Young people aren't buying homes. They can't. I mean, you're going week to week. What is it? Up to 30% now is eating week to week in their job. 30% of America, and it doesn't have to be like this. I mean, you don't come in and cause chaos. You don't come in and shut off our oil. We have more oil here. We know what to do with it. Why we do not take advantage of this? I don't know. And I don't want to. This is going to sound probably wrong, but it's almost like this is, and I believe it. It's intentional.
Yes,
intentional. And how can an administration, or how can a group hate the country that is the land, and still is, not as much anymore, the land of milk and honey, where you can come here broke, and in a few years, how many millionaires have we produced here that came here with an idea and a dream? I mean, Microsoft, wasn't that born in a garage?
Yeah.
All these things are born in a garage. You get guys coming. I mean, look at Uber, Lyft, just little things that popped up in the last few years. DoorDash. I mean, I'm gonna make a company where someone goes out and delivers my food from Subway. Great, person's a millionaire now.
Yes.
And you go and do that. Yeah, but it seems like it's been destroyed.
Yeah, so what we're talking about really has nothing to do with party, because the parties are the same. It's all about our rights. Our rights are to have a border secure, and I'll just say you're a former Marine, but there was never a former Marine. You're a Marine. So,
once that mindset's in there, you're not going to get rid of that.
So it's not about, I don't care who's in office, because if it's a Republican doing the same thing, I would say the same thing. So this is like not the United States that it used to be.
No, it is not. And I agree with you 100% there. I don't care if it's a Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever, whoever's the one doing it. If you're doing it intentionally and the country is suffering, you get called out on it. But the problem here is there's only a small percentage calling them out. You got a majority of your news media out there that are covering up and going along with it, and it doesn't get truly reported. Honestly, it gets reported. But again, if there's a R by your name, a D by your name, an I by your name, your first goal, your first duty, your first requirement, your first responsibility is security of America. That's what our federal government is here for, is to secure our country, the safety of the American people. Borders wide open is not safety of the American people, where you got people coming in from hundreds of different countries around the world. Many of them are adversarial enemies, where you have money going out for foreign wars. And what do we have? What do we have in stake in them? When you have, when you support every illegitimate cause and waste of government money, your taxpayers' dollars and my taxpayer dollars. And we have no say-so in it anymore.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, it's sad. So tell us something we don't know about George Washington before you go.
Okay. Well, you do know I did not have wooden teeth, right?
Really?
A lot of people, but actually, the vast majority of people out there will say George Washington had wooden teeth. No, he did not. The idea of wooden teeth, his teeth, when he lost his first tooth when he was, I think he was 24 years of age. And he only had one left by the time he was sworn in at his inauguration. Okay, so he started losing his teeth. Well, part of it is he liked sweets. He liked to eat ice cream. So, he didn't really have the healthiest diet. So during the course of his lifetime, later on, he had a couple of sets of dentures made. And they were made out of ivory, human teeth. His dentist purchased human teeth and, the ivory, hippopotamus teeth, bone, whichever. And ivory, when it's stained, has little lines. It looks like wood grain. So when it's stained and everything else started to look like kind of wood. So people were thinking it was wood. He never had a wooden tooth. As a matter of fact, there's a couple sets of his dentures are still in existence at one I think is in New York City in a medical museum or something, I believe. I don't want to say which one. I'm not exactly sure. I have to consult my notes. But yeah, and his dentist would purchase those for either 6 pence or 6 shillings, whichever. He would purchase the teeth, and they would shape them and everything, try to put them in dentures. Now, a lot of times you look at paintings of Washington, it looks like his lower gum right there is sticking out a little bit, right? Well, those set of dentures were so uncomfortable, and he had springs in the back, so he had to purposely close his mouth, keep his mouth closed, in order to pop open. So, his gums are inflamed a lot. They were so uncomfortable. But again, big springs back there. And one more side note on the false teeth. During the Revolutionary War, early on, in a letter to his dentist and everything else, it got confiscated by the British. And the British used that letter to ridicule him in the press, to make fun of him. So after that, he would write to the dentist in code. They would write back to each other, conceal what they were truly saying. But there's didn't really throw, silver dollar over the Rappahannock River. Didn't skip it across. Did throw a rock up to the height of the Natural Bridge, which is over 200 some feet tall, though. Thomas Jefferson even put out there that George Washington was the best horseman in the state of Virginia, which should be the case because he was on a horse his entire life. I myself grew up with horses when I was younger, so I like to ride and don't have a problem riding a horse. But there's so much to know about George Washington. I mean, you think about it. 1753, he gets brought into the national spotlight with a trip up to Fort LaBeouf to tell the French to get out. 1799, he finally passed away at Mount Vernon, just 2 years after leaving the presidency. So from 1753 to 1797, we were talking 44 years of main American line history for this man. He's was always involved. Always involved.
Wow. Yeah, you just blew my mind on that stuff.
Well, he was and one of the reasons, let me go back a little bit. Thank God George didn't get that commission with the British military. Yes. And that left a thorn in his side his entire life. Because during Braddock's campaign, 1755, when the French surprised him, whether just a few miles away from the fort, Washington observed how quickly the redcoats, the British, he was British too at that time, not in a British uniform, but he was in his militia. He saw how quickly they became disoriented, how quickly it turned into chaos, and how they disregarded their officers' signals and commands and just rushed to the back, trying to get out of there. And he saw how quickly they broke down, but he also saw the militia stand up and cover the retreat. So and from that point on, says, maybe we have been misjudging these British, and they're not as capable or not as strong and not invincible as we think they are. And that stuck with him. The fact also that he got slighted every step of the way in trying to get that commission, because the royalists always looked down on the colonials as far as a military respect. They never thought they were of the caliber well enough, smart enough, trained enough, any whatsoever, not gentleman enough to be a military officer for the British. So when he was made, and he'd been out of the military, think about this, 1758, he left the militia. 1775, he becomes the commanding general of the Continental Forces. So 17 years later, he'd been out of the military, but he had taken back up he did taken up the militia colonelship right before then, but he had been out of the military for a long time. But he showed up at the second Congress in uniform. One, was he positioned himself for a spot? Who knows? I think General Washington, but then as a colonel in his uniform, was letting them know, I'm willing to serve. Whether it be in whatever capacity, I'm here, I'm in uniform, I can serve and will serve. John Hancock thought he was going to get it, but he didn't.
Really?
Hancock, he's a Boston man from Massachusetts, and the troops are up in Massachusetts. You have Lexington, Concord, Bunker Hill, and all that is going up there in New England. And George Washington's a Virginia man. So John Hancock thought, I'm a Boston man. He thought it was going to be him, but nope. John Adams and the others thought different, and George Washington was made the commanding general.
So, just a quick question. Were the leaders and generals all nobles in the U.S.?
Our noblemen?
Yeah.
No, okay, you ever heard of Henry Knox?
I have.
George Washington, commander of artillery, right?
Okay.
He was a bookseller.
Oh, okay.
He was a bookseller. How did he teach himself artillery? Reading books. Anthony Wayne. None of these were noblemen. There was two names that we sound familiar to that had previous British or military experience that are known off the top of everybody's head. Horatio Gates, Charles Lee.
Yeah.
Those two, and both of those, conspired against Washington. Both of those fell in the end. Everybody that went after General Washington or tried to damage him backfired, failed miserably. And General Washington came out unscathed at the end. Duty, service, integrity, virtue, strong moral fiber. General Washington.
Yes. Wow. That is incredible.
Yeah. So when people ask me, and you asked me at the beginning of your podcast, why General Washington? So I guess the easy thing to respond back would be, why not? Why not? I mean, my library is full. I've got 3 shelves behind me. It's nothing but Washington. I mean, all aspects of his life. And I got all the founding fathers. I got foreign correspondence of the military during the Revolutionary with foreign powers, you name it. I got everything down here to learn and speak and do Washington. Can I remember it all? No. I mean, I get caught up sometimes, I don't remember that, or I don't recall, or whichever, but it's incredible. Every time I read a book, I'll pick up some little snippet. Oh, I didn't know that. How about that? And I'm never disappointed. Again, we talked about the unfortunate aspect of our history of the slavery. If anybody in our history, founding fathers or paper today would go back, we'd probably change that if we could.
Well, it's a history of the world.
Right.
So, the other thing is, before you go, okay, do you do enactments, Civil War enactments, or things like that?
Matter of fact, I don't do Civil War much unless it's they cover Revolutionary through to War of 1812 all the way through. I'll go through and I'll walk around because most of the time there's enthusiasts there that will really appreciate the fact I'm there. And I got invited up to one on Sunday actually up at Mansfield. They're going to they're supposed to have 700 some vendors and all aspects of military, whichever. I know Abraham Lincoln's going to be there. A friend of mine that portrays him. I've been invited to several. The thing is, though, a lot of things I do are free. Unfortunately, most I cannot do because it's expensive. I was in Dayton this morning doing the elementary school out there, Kleppinger Community School. And what a blast. I mean, that's my favorite. When I see the little kids and their eyes light up like saucers and, oh my gosh, are you General Washington? Yes, I am. Let's have a talk. So, we'll chat. But then adults will get in conversations with you. And, I learn stuff from somebody every day. Even youngsters will sometimes surprise me with a question. So reenactments, I do almost anything I possibly can if I can get there, if I can afford it. Or if we can reach an agreement on compensation or whichever. I don't like turning down much anything. So
right.
Even if I don't get paid, so what? I go out there and I learn. I have a good time. I network. I meet other people, interesting people. There's always, like I said, there's always someone somewhere that's going to hit me with something I didn't know. So it's always fun. It gets hot sometimes. My first event in August of 2022. Was up in Fort LaBeouf. They were rededicating a 100-year-old statue of Washington. It was a statue of him handing a letter to the French Commandant. And it was 90 plus degrees. And I volunteered to do that. I got on Facebook. I searched George Washington. Okay, they were having this event. And I typed in a message, I'd like to put on my George Washington uniform and attend that. 2 minutes later, a couple of people on the historical side, could you please? I said, okay. It cost me about $1,200 to do that. I had to pay for my own hotel, my food, and whatnot. So that was money out of my pocket, but it was my first event, and it went over extremely well. I had a blast. It was I wear 3 layers of wool, so 90-degree heat. I don't know how hot that really is. I'm sweating underneath this hat right now, but and it's a lot of times you're inside, a lot of times you're outside. I'm walking around, and I do try to at all times carry myself as General Washington. I mean, straight up figure, Marine Corps, stick out that chest, suck in that gut, stand erect, be representative of what a professional soldier looks like. So I try to maintain that even at 60.
Imagine a president being a soldier too. That's hard to imagine. That's
hard
amazing.
to imagine anymore. Yeah. It's hard to imagine anymore. Back then, look how many presidents we had who were military. And there was a lot of them. And I think a president who's prior military, what he brings to the table is unparalleled, unequal.
I agree. Totally agree.
You come with that duty. You come with knowing what that sacrifice means. You come with knowing what decisions you might have to make, who you might have to send into harm's way. And we're just not getting a lot of that anymore. But I tell you what, I'd gladly accept a president that loves America.
Me too.
Whoever that is.
Right. And being former military guys, we know how little we are in the whole picture.
Right.
Because our job was, we had a duty to do, and that's what we did. But we see things a little differently. It's hard to see military guys have things go to their heads, right? So we got some military people in Congress, and they know where they came from, and they know what they went through to serve this country. Unfortunately, not everybody does.
No, unfortunately, they don't. And that, if I had my way about it, I'd kind of like to say, there's a motto out there. I think most of us should serve in some sort of capacity, a year or two, military, whatever service. Learn what dedication means. Learn what sacrifice means. Learn what giving to a little back to your country means. Be thankful for where you are, because you're not going to experience anything like this anywhere else. But again, to circle back there, the military generals that have been in the president's position have been fairly successful as well as a president. So, and they didn't have weak knees either.
Right.
You know what you were getting with them.
Yes, I like that about it. Yeah, I know George Bush was in the National Guard, but he went his own way. But other people, Eisenhower, people who know they understand war, they understand the nuances. So they teach you that you know everything about your service when you're in it, and you know everything about history of wars and how things are started and how things are escalated, putting people in harm's way. It's a whole nother world. It's a whole nother level when you go that far. But if you understand it, you just don't do things like you just don't willy-nilly. You can't do it that way. You have to do this. You got to listen to your generals.
No, yeah, exactly. And, and to disregard what generals tell you and to make a decision when you have no idea and they do, how would you or why would you ever disregard that type of advice from the battlefront, from the location where all this has transpired? You have no idea. They're your eyes and ears. Why would you?
Exactly.
Yep. Like you said, being one member of a unit, one member of a squad, one member of a platoon, or whichever, we all have a part to play in whatever that squad is, whatever that squad in that platoon is, or whatever a platoon in that company is. We all have a part to play, and we know our part has to reinforce and assist the other part, or this thing doesn't work.
Exactly.
Military men bring something different to it, and I'll gravitate to a military guy anytime. So we have something in common.
Yes, right. So anything else you want to say, or you got anything to tell us before you go?
Well, again, I enjoy doing what I'm doing. I don't know how many years I'm going to do. Hopefully I'll do it for the next 5 or 6 years. I'm really looking forward to getting to that 250th anniversary, 2026. Next year in 2 years, I hope to be very busy. If you want to reach out to me, you can find me. You don't mind if I do a plug, do you?
Go right ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm on Facebook, Experience George Washington, or if you want to go to my webpage, www.experiencegeorgewashington.com. All lowercase. Yeah, I'm out there, but I bring fun, bring excitement. Obviously, I'm full of energy, so the George Washington I'm going to get is going to be the lively one that existed back in 1776.
So, Experience George Washington.
Yeah, it's Facebook again, Experience George Washington, or on my webpage, www.experiencegeorgewashington.com.
Okay.
And I travel. I went to Florida in January. Been to Pennsylvania. Going to Pennsylvania in 2 weeks, actually, to Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Just wherever they want me. Wherever they want me, I'll go. So.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being on the program. I learned a lot. I am blown away by your knowledge.
Well, I could. This is one subject I could talk about a lot. And I was doing just one more thing. I was doing the kids this morning, and I said, okay, I got 6, 7, 8-year-olds. I'm gonna have to bring this down a few levels so we can just have general fun conversation. But believe it or not, they knew a lot of my questions and stuff. So I was very, very impressed with them, and they were inquisitive. So that's who we got to reach. We got to keep our history alive in the youngsters. So that's what I'm there for. Yeah. Wow. And it's all of our responsibilities: moms, dads, parents, schools, kids, everybody. It's our responsibility to keep our history alive, because it does, unfortunately, at times repeat itself, sometimes for the bad.
Exactly.
And our history is worth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Radabaugh. I saw you on TV in Dayton, and I thought, I got to get that. I was trying to get all three of you, but anybody, I reached out for you first, and I was like, I got to have this guy on.
Well,
it means a lot.
Hopefully, it hasn't been a disappointment. Kevin, I appreciate you having me. Believe it or not, you are my first podcast I've ever done.
Really?
Yes.
You can come back anytime. You can come back as yourself or as George Washington.
Well, whenever you want to have another conversation, we'll have another conversation. If you want to talk about anything in particular, tell me what we're going to talk about, and I'll be ready to go. I
sure will. All right.
All right. You have a good evening now. Thank you very much.
All right. You too. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Let's see here. So anyway, George Radabaugh, that was awesome. So a lot of things happening. Actually, so our new book, let's see, what is it? So Brody Loses Weight is on. It's back. It's Spanishized. We have the Spanish version out. You can see that. You can find that on Amazon or on our webpage, browniefoxpublishing.com. And also, go ahead and check out experiencegeorgewashington.com from our guest tonight. And I appreciate him being on and coming here. And George Washington didn't have wooden teeth. What is going on? It was some kind of like Mandela effect. It seems like it, but I know it's not. So talking to the experts, I learned a lot. So other people, I like people like that. They know their stuff, and definitely he knew everything about George Washington. I had my notes and everything, and I brought everything up on it, and he knew the answers right away. Incredible. Anyway, that'll do it for this week for the Kevin Waite Show or the American Unleashed Show, whichever one you want to call it. Anyway, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week. God bless America. Minuteman right there. There you go.